Dr. Atchison here, and we're on our third topic, attachment, in our series on social and emotional development. So attachment is this strong, affectionate tie we have with special people in our lives. And it leads us to feel good when we interact with them. And they also are where we go to when we're stressed and we need comfort. And I don't say stress like, oh my gosh, a test, I'm stressed out. I mean, when we need comfort, whether it's sad or angry or any of those things, those kind of negative emotions, that's where we go to for comfort. But we get these positive feelings from being with them in general. And these special people, we typically think of mothers as the primary caregiver, but we know that fathers have been found to be equally nurturing and competent. And so when we talk about attachment, we're not just talking about attachment to mothers, we're talking about attachment to fathers as well. And also infants can become attached to other caregivers as well. So this is not something that's exclusive for mothers. Mothers typically are the primary caregiver. But as our gender roles change in our culture, we see more and more dads and other family members becoming these primary caregivers for infants. So let's talk about Bowlby's ethological theory of attachment. The primary assumption behind this theory is that all species are born with species-typical behaviors and tendencies that promote social behaviors. And these really signal and these are really products of this evolutionary history. And what's important about these is that they increase our chances for survival of a species. So this theory is really it's applied to humans, but Bowlby is saying that this is more than just humans. This is encompassing other animals as well, and we have these set of experiences that are part of our evolutionary history that we expect to happen, and it promotes this social connectedness. And this social connectedness is what's increasing the survival chances for the species. So one of the other videos you're required to watch is the video on Harlow's monkeys, which is again linked in both iCollege and on YouTube. And again, this theory kind of comes out of some of this research. So Harlow's monkeys was really a groundbreaking research, and Bowlby came after that and really built upon some of these findings and findings in other areas to build this theory of attachment, that one that's not based on just needs, just physical needs, but is also based on emotional needs. So what's the purpose of attachment? To protect young from discomfort, predators, etc., and to promote the infant's exploration of the environment. The parent is a secure base from which to kind of explore. So when you look at those Harlow's monkeys videos, you'll see the baby clinging to the furry, cuddly mom while leaning over to get the milk from the wire mom. So again, this comfort, this protecting from discomfort, this secure base in which to explore the environment. Bowlby says that the development of attachment takes place in 4 phases. And this has really been applied to humans here. So these times are based on human infants. So the pre-attachment phase is from birth to about 6 weeks, and this is when those built-in signals such as smiling and crying help bring the newborn in close contact with other humans. So we talked about in our early infant capacities about crying as communication. We see these reflexive smiles. So babies at this age aren't smiling because they're happy. It's more of a reflexive smile, so it's not a true social smile yet. And again, this promotes that attachment. This promotes that close contact. We talked about the grasping, when infants grasp a hold of caregivers' fingers, that produces, promotes attachment. So these are the kinds of things, these built-in signals that are happening really, really early on in development that kind of serve as building blocks for later attachment. So this is like the foundation that it's built on, based on this close contact between the infant and other humans. The next stage is from 6 weeks to about 6 to 8 months, and it's the attachment in the making phase. Infants really start to respond differently to a familiar caregiver than a stranger. So they're going to start to notice some of that. Now, part of the thing that you should think about in this is think back to our face processing. We don't see that infants are really good at detecting the internal features of the face until about 2 months. So this is coinciding with this time period when infants are really able to distinguish well between internal facial features between one person versus another. That's going to be important. So when we think about dynamic systems theory, this is that kind of thing. We have a change on face processing, and that allows for a change in social and emotional processing. So again, these things are all working in tandem to create these outcomes for infants. The third phase is the clear-cut attachment phase, and this is really where attachment to the familiar caregiver is evident. And this is happening anywhere from about 6 to 8 months to about 18 months to 2 years, kind of in that range there. So from about, a half a year old to about 2 years old. And we know that we can see that we really have this attachment. How this is evident is babies start to exhibit separation anxiety. They become upset when whoever that familiar caregiver is goes away, when mom goes away or when dad goes away. They become upset. They also use that caregiver as a secure base. So we talked about the monkeys using the cuddly mommy, the fabric covered mom as a secure base. And human infants do the same thing. They'll go and explore something, and then they'll come back in and check in with mom or dad or caregiver. Sometimes they just come in, run over, give you a hug, and then run off and go. And this is really, really apparent in this phase when infants have this secure attachment. Kind of come in, check in, come see what you're doing, and then go out from there. And the fourth phase is this formation of a reciprocal relationship. So before it's kind of been one-sided, but really from about 18 months to 2 years and on, and when I say on, I mean and the rest of your life, we really start to see a decrease in separation anxiety. And we start to see this relationship not just being, what can the caregiver provide to the infant, but this back and forth where we're getting, kind of positive effects from both sides. This healthy relationship where people are kind of in relationship together as opposed to just, I'm doing the things that I need to do for you. So we really see this change in here. Now, we also see that toddlers still don't want their caregiver to leave. I know that when my daughter was about 3, 4, and I would leave to go teach evening class or afternoon classes, she had all kinds of activities that we had to do right when it was time for me to go. She would, real quick, oh, hold on, Mom, real quick, I need to make you a necklace. And she would throw 3 beads on a necklace. Oh, wait, hold on, Mom, I need to make you a picture. And all these little tiny things trying to get me not to leave. And she thought, hey, well, if it's an art craft or something like that, Mom really likes those, that'll get her to stay around longer. And so infants and toddlers are really trying to persuade these caregivers not to go in this reciprocal relationship time period. So the other part of Bowlby's ethological theory of attachment is that our attachment to our caregivers really develops this internal working model of relationships. And what this is it's a set of expectations that's derived from those 4 levels of attachment, those 4 phases of attachment. And it tells us what we expect about the availability of these attachment figures and their likelihood to provide us the comfort and the support we need when we need it. And Bowlby says that this really becomes a guide for all of our future close relationships. So there's people that study attachment in adolescence and adulthood, people that look at attachment in marital relationships and in romantic relationships. So we're really still working with this idea that the attachment that we have with our caregivers as young children, again, from birth to about 2 years, that this is really so formative that it's our guide for all future relationships later. So, Bowlby had a student, and her name was Mary Ainsworth. And she devised what we call the strange situation. And it's a procedure for measuring the quality of these attachments. So if attachment's forming this inner working model of how all of our future relationships are going to go, then it's really advantageous if we can measure it in some way, measure to see how healthy it is in some way when children are little, so that we can adjust if need be. We can kind of improve attachments earlier on, and look at that. So Mary Ainsworth devised this strange situation. This is another required video that's linked both on YouTube and on iCollege. And it measures the quality of attachment between about 1 and 2 years of age. So it measures it in that fourth and final stage of attachment. So that reciprocal relationship where we've got that give and take. And what it involves is really these really short separations. So, researcher comes in, mom leaves, and they measure to see what kid does. Mom comes back and they look at this reunion. And they kind of do a bunch of these little things in these different phases. And then they look at the pattern of the infant's behavior. Was infant crying? How did the infant, were they easily soothed? These sorts of things. So make sure you watch that video. And from that, there's various kinds of attachment that you can derive from Mary Ainsworth's strange situation. The first of which is secure attachment. And this really characterizes infants who may or may not cry when their parents leave, but are easily comforted when she returns. And when we talk about these different attachments later, you'll see how this is really the healthiest and the most beneficial attachment style. This is the one you want to have. This is our gold standard of attachment. Avoidant attachment is a type of insecure attachment, and this describes infants who are usually not distressed when the parent leaves and who really don't care when they come back. So avoidant really, is named well, right? So parent leaves, they don't really care. Parent comes back, they don't really care. So again, we really don't have this kind of they're kind of avoiding that caregiver. And this is a type of insecure attachment. Another one that we can get from the strange situation is resistant attachment. And this is also an insecure attachment. And this identifies infants who remain close to the parent before the attachment, before the departure. So they're kind of clingy. And they display this really angry and resistive behavior when they get back. They're really mad that the parent left. And they take it out on the parent. So they're very, very clingy to the parent before they leave, and when they get back, they're really unhappy that there was this separation. And the last one that we're going to talk about is disorganized or disoriented attachment. And this characterizes infants who respond in a really confused and contradictory way when they're reunited with their parents because they don't know what to expect. They don't have this pattern, this set of expectations from a caregiver. And without this set of expectations, they're confused. And so they don't respond in the same way each time. They respond differently each time. And this pattern really seems to reflect the greatest insecurity, the kind of greatest kind of problems, because, this kid doesn't have any expectations. In the first 3, there's expectations, but they may in the other insecure attachments, they may not be great expectations, but there's expectations. Hey, I know mom's not super involved. I know mom, I'm not expecting a lot from her. But or expect mom to go away. But in this last one, we have this situation where the infants really don't know what to expect. And that's even more problematic. So the strange situation really assesses the quality of that attachment relationship. And again, it's measuring specific patterns of reunion behavior. We can also predict these patterns from other kinds of interactions, including feeding patterns, just interactions with the child, bodily contact in the first 3 months. These sorts of things have a correlation and a predictive pattern with these specific patterns of attachment. We see that the quality of the interaction during the 4th quarter, the sensitivity, acceptance, cooperation, and accessibility are indicative of these earlier patterns of behavior, the feeding interaction and such. Secure attached infants, they really report in these first 3 months, especially having more harmonious feedings, face-to-face interactions, affectionate holding, and a prompt response to crying. So when we look at these kinds of behaviors, we see kids who at, between 1 and 2 are securely attached. So these kinds of behaviors are what are creating securely attached infants. Insecurely attached, and remember those are the last 3 different kinds: avoidant, resistant, and disorganized, disoriented. These parents reported less satisfactory feedings. We see less contingent interactions, and contingent interactions are when baby needs something, that response. There's a contingency there. I know when I do this, you're going to do this. And this is not necessarily like, every time baby makes a sound, mom drops everything she's doing and runs to baby's side. But when baby is really upset, that upset cry, not that just like, I'm bored, I need some attention cry, that there is that contingent response. We also see less affectionate physical contact, and we see less responsive to crying. And when we look at these attachment styles at 15 months, we see that these are correlated with how preschoolers are described by their teachers at 3 years old. So we see infants who at 15 months were categorized as securely attached. They were typically more likely to be described as a leader, sensitive to others, popular with peers, initiating activities, eager to learn, self-directed. Whereas the infants who were insecurely attached at 15 months, at 3 were more often described as socially withdrawn, hesitant, less willing to learn, and less curious. And when you think about it, it makes a lot of sense, right? So if you're an infant and you're securely attached to mom, and you know that you can go out and explore and come back and check in with her, and you're okay with that, you can see how that's going to lead to self-directed behaviors. Whereas if you're insecurely attached to mom and you don't have that good secure base, or any caregiver, you don't have that good secure base in any caregiver, that's going to make you more withdrawn. That's going to make you less curious. When you're getting sensitivity from your caregiver in a securely attached relationship, when you're getting those positive physical content, you're getting all that contingent behavior, that person is teaching you how to be sensitive to others. And so these children are more likely to be sensitive to others and more likely to be popular with peers. Whereas when you don't have that experience of how do I deal with other people, it's harder to know what to do. And so social withdrawal is more common. So again, this is really where we're starting to see that this attachment really, really early on affects later relationships. And this is just at 3. Again, we'll see these patterns again and again and again throughout development. Culture obviously plays a role. This whole thing on attachment is all environmentally based. It's all based on that relationship with that individual caregiver, and how that caregiver responds to that infant. And so culture is going to play a role in this too. Infants universally show the same pattern of attachment. So all infants in all cultures, we see these 4 patterns. We see the secure and the insecure attachments. We see avoidant, resistant, disorganized, disoriented. So we see all of those. Cultural differences, however, contribute to kind of the distribution of the attachment style in nations other than the United States. So Bowlby and Ainsworth were actually British, but we still are going to have kind of similar kinds of cultures between the United States and the United Kingdom. We also see that parental sensitivity, which we know is important for secure attachment, is important in all cultures. Again, this is just basic species survival stuff, right? But how we express that sensitivity is different in different cultures. And so that's where we'll see the differences. It's not necessarily the sensitivity per se, it's how that sensitivity is expressed, and that can create these different patterns of attachment. So again, we see cross-cultural evidence indicating that we see these attachment patterns have to be interpreted differently in other cultures. So for example, these studies done in Germany, German parents really encourage their children to be independent, which may explain why more German infants show this avoidant attachment style than American babies. So when they're encouraging more independence, we're creating a situation where there is a little bit more avoidance. And so So infants are getting those expectations. They're getting those expectations that, hey, I'm supposed to be more independent. And so when mom leaves, no big deal. And when mom comes back, no big deal. That we have this... that's what's expected of me. And avoidance, one of those that's built on expectations. It's just a different set of expectations than a securely attached infant. We see that Japanese infants, so studies of infants in Japan, typically display more resistant attachment responses. Japanese mothers rarely leave their babies in the care of strange people. And so this really causes this strange situation to be even more strange than it already is. And this is going to cause these infants to respond. This is going to be a lot more stressful for these infants than it would be for infants in another culture because it's even more strange. And so these infants are going to be really angry when mom comes back. Like, I'm not used to being in this other setting in the first place, so I'm clingy in the first place. And then when you left and come back, I'm mad at you now because, I mean, you don't normally leave. I'm usually right here with you. What's going on? And so again, you can see how this different parenting practice really results in different kinds of attachment styles within a culture. We also see that secure attachment, regardless of the culture, is by far the most common attachment style in all cultures. So we see Germany, Japan, the United States, all of them, that yellow line, that secure attachment, is the highest and is way more than 50% in all of these cultures. Again, we'll see Germany, because of that independent streak that they want for their infants, we tend to see more avoidance styles, where in Japan we tend to see more resistance styles, again, because of those differences in caregiving behavior. But again, parental sensitivity is important in all cultures, and so we're seeing this we're seeing secure attachment being most common in all of these cultures too. Again, you can see, think back to Bowlby, you can see how this is good for species survival. If you're sensitive to your child, then you're sensitive to that child's needs, that child's more likely to thrive. That child's more likely to develop health in a healthy way, which is good for the survival of the species. Okay, so the last topic we're going to talk about is related to attachment is childcare. So the NICHD Early Childhood Research Network, which is the National Institute for Child Health and Development, they had a longitudinal research study that studied 1,300 children and their families from infancy until 15. Okay, and the primary thing that they were interested in was the effect of childcare. So what effect does childcare have? Is daycare hurting kids? Is staying with mom hurting kids? You know, what's the best practices? Where do we see these kinds of relationships? And one of the things that they were interested in was attachment. How does this childcare setting, whether it's at home or with a non-familial caregiver, or a childcare setting, or any of these things, how does this affect this attachment relationship? And they collected information and analyzed how different childcare arrangements related to measures of the child's health, their behavior, school performance, and these various other indicators of development. So one of my professors in graduate school actually is a member of this early childhood research network, and the data set on this thing is enormous. So I can't even begin to tell you all these different indicators of development that they used, because it's just a huge data set. They have so much information. And she was always offering the data set up to everybody. Like, hey, if you want to do a little look at this data set and do a little pet project, we've got so much data because there was just too much data that these researchers they still haven't got all the way through it yet, and haven't looked at all the different questions that they could ask. Their primary thing that they were interested in, again, was this effect of how childcare arrangements affected these things, and attachment was one of the things that they were interested in. They looked at infancy, early childhood, middle childhood, and middle adolescence. And the finding is that what's most important is the quality of childcare. So it doesn't matter if you're at home with a parent, if you're at somebody's house, if you're at a childcare setting, the quality of that childcare is what's important. And that quality really has effects on cognitive and language development. The amount of language that's directed at the child in the childcare setting is important, which is not surprising, right? We just finished chapter 10 and we talked about language development, and we talked about the context, the environmental context for language development. The better the input, the better the output. And that's what this study found too. So infants who were really were spoken to a lot and read to a lot had better language development. Infants that spent time in front of screens and things like that didn't. But what they also found is that there were absolutely no effects on attachment. So they where there's obviously different types of attachment in each of these different childcare settings, there was no effects that one childcare setting created or promoted certain attachment types. So despite what anyone would say about childcare and attachment, as long as you're in a quality childcare environment, and again, that doesn't matter if it's in the baby's home, someone else's home, if it's in a childcare setting, any of the various different options, as long as it's a quality environment for cognitive and language development, you're okay, because attachment is separate, is unrelated to that. There's enough other experiences with the primary caregiver that attachment can be formed. We don't have to be with the baby 24 hours a day to develop this securely attached relationship. If you want more information on this, you can follow the link below, or you can see iCollege. The link is posted there as well. And this ends our chapter 11 discussion of social and emotional development. Thanks.